Hey guys, it's Olivia here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm here to give you my April reading wrap up. So in the month of April I joined in with the Owls Readathon and also with Tome Topple, so I'll leave in the description box down below which books ticked off which prompts because I'm not going to run through them in the video. I also read 12 books, so let's get straight down to what I read and what I thought of everything that I read. So the first book that I just want to fly through because I want it over with is Leopard Red Wolf by Marlon James. If you watched my reading vlogs, you know that it took me ages to read this 600-page book and I absolutely hated it. This was my first one-star read of 2019 and I am so disappointed in this book. What is this one about? I've read 600 pages of this book and what is it about is a very good question. So it's about Wolf, who is this main character who has this amazing nose and can smell things from a very far distance, and he has a best friend called Leopard, who is this shape-shifting being who can shift into a leopard, and they are sent on this quest to find this child. However, this book follows long before they get their quest, and then it follows the quest and then it just kind of does something random at the end, and everything is so messed up in this book. But I'm going to tell you the reasons why I hated it so strongly. First of all, because it was absolutely boring. I felt no sense of urgency. I felt no sense of suspense. I didn't feel like there was anything to keep me reading. Secondly, the writing style was just a mess. Okay, so yes, he wanted to do something very abstract and something that would make you really think and something quite experimental. However, if it gives the reader a headache while reading it, if it just is so nonsensical that you can get nothing out of it, then the writing style doesn't work. The reader shouldn't have to work 1,000, percent to understand one sentence. It was harder to read than Shakespeare, and Shakespeare is usually what people call very hard reading. And thirdly, also, the characters were so ridiculous, they just didn't make any sense. I didn't know what drove the characters. I didn't know if there was anything that drove them. I didn't understand Leopard's motivations for anything that he did. And the main character is kind of rude and also really sexist towards women. Every single woman that he sees in this book he calls a witch, and that's not even like a compliment. He really thinks they're evil. And one character is even like, yeah, you've got problems with women, you just seem to hate them all. And he's like, oh yeah, I really do. Doesn't change his accents whatsoever. So yes, basically this book is trash. Not like the good trash, but the really I want to throw it in the bin trash. Unfortunately, this is a hardback signed edition, personalised to me, so I have no idea what I'm going to do with it. But I don't want to think about this book anymore. So after that 2-minute rant, we're just gonna move right on to my only 5-star read of the month, which was The Nowhere Girls by Amy Reed. And if you saw my reaction after reading this in my vlogs, you'll know that I found it very hard to articulate how much this book meant to me, but I'm going to try my very best. The Nowhere Girls is set in this very small town, and in this town there is very intense rape culture. A teenage girl was raped and she said that she was raped, and she tried to accuse her rapists of what they have done. However, everyone in the town didn't support her or believe her, and she actually had to move out. And Grace, who is one of the main characters, moves into the house where she used to live, and she kind of becomes friends with these 2 other outcasts, and together they start the Nowhere Girls, which is this anonymous female club that is there to fight the rapist culture. This one has all the rep, and rep doesn't make it what's good, but it just made it all the more interesting to read because we have 3 perspectives. One of them is this Mexican girl who just hates Mexican food and has really big problems with her family and how overworked she is. We've got Erin, who is autistic, and we've got Grace, who is a fat girl who is a Christian and is a liberal Christian. That was one of the reasons why I love this book, because it's so nice to see Christianity that's not demonized. I read a lot of LGBT plus books and Christianity gets a lot of negative hate in those books, which is understandable because there are many different types of Christians. However, it's always nice when you can see your religion being represented nicely, and especially a religion, like a representation of your religion that you feel close to. So I was really thankful to see this really nice representation of Christianity. This book is filled with so much feminism and girl power. I was there rooting for these girls, doing what they were doing, fighting against rape culture. I was definitely here for it, and it just made my heart so happy. There was suspense, but I will say that this is a very, very character-driven book, so just be aware that the plot is kind of all in the social movement and not really in a, oh, let's figure out what's going to happen next kind of way. And the friendships were great. I just thought this book was fantastic. Imagine it, The Hate You Give, but then imagine the topic that it's kind of trying to address and break down is not racism but rape culture and sexual assault. Huge trigger warnings for rape and sexual assault in this one because it is thoroughly discussed and it's kind of at the forefront of the book. Moving on, I also read Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I think I'm pronouncing that last name wrong, but this book, guys, was really, really good. So this is a classic that follows this main character who gets married to somebody who was previously married to a woman called Rebecca. However, Rebecca has passed away, she drowned, and she marries this widower and they go and live back in his house, and it's just a lot more gothic and a lot more going on than she believed when she got married in complete innocence. And this book kind of has the gothic kind of feel to it. It's kind of a thriller if thrillers were written in the past. So imagine the thriller genre but then a classic version of it, and I really, really liked it. The beginning, it took me a little bit to get into it because the writing style is so descriptive, which is beautiful, and I love the writing style, but it did take a while for me to adjust and get used to it, especially as I wasn't expecting a classic. And then the suspense at the end, I was just breezing through it and absolutely loving this book. So Rebecca is definitely a really good one for me. Then I read The Rest of Us Just Live Here by Patrick Ness. If you watched my March wrap-up, you know that I fell in love with his Chaos Walking trilogy, and it's one of my all-time favourite series now, but I wanted to read my way through all of his work, so I read The Rest of Us Just Live Here. And this one is quite funny because it's a contemporary, but it's kind of set in a world where all the fantasy novels of young adult go on. So it follows these characters who are just normal kids. They're not the chosen ones, they're not the main protagonists for young adult novels, but they can see all the people who would be main characters kind of running around and fighting vampires and stuff like that while they're just living their normal life and hoping to graduate before, you know, the chosen ones blow up the school again or something like that. So I just found all the young adult parody elements, like how all the chosen one characters all kind of had the same name, because come on, that happens. How many times have we seen the name Reese in fantasy books lately? I also thought that the contemporary itself was just okay. It's not a memorable book, but it's just a nice, light-hearted, maybe summer kind of read. It's got the themes of, you know, growing up, going to university, what's going to happen when all your friends are all around the world, you know, do your parents love you? You've got some really deep questions about mental health illnesses, because we've got some recovering from an eating disorder rep, and we've got OCD rep, and we've got positive therapy and medication rep, so it's all in there and handled quite well and really nicely unpacked. I didn't really like our main character, but I loved his best friend Jared. I thought Jared was the sweetest person, so sweet. Then we've got Room by Emma Donoghue, which I finally read, and I'm not going to tell you much about this book because the less you know about it the better, but it's centered with this mother and her son called Jack, and they live in a room and they are locked in that room. That's all I'm going to say. A mum and a son locked in a room. And from there you just go on a journey. I hesitate to call it a thriller because I feel like it's so much more than that, but it was quite a thrilling read. And I liked that it didn't stop where you would think that it would stop, but it continued, so you got to see more that happens to the characters. I loved the characters. I loved the mother so much. I loved Jack so much, and I feel like this was a really realistic representation of their situation, and I think the way it was written was so creative. The author chose to write it from the perspective of Jack, the 5-year-old, and the writing style just reflects how a 5-year-old would think and talk, and I was just blown away by how well she put herself into a 5-year-old's mind and, you know, emotions. I thought this book was really brilliant, so worth reading, and I cannot wait to watch the movie. Then I read Angelfall by Susan E, and this one just made me think that I should have gone on the bandwagon when the young adult, you know, genre was completely infatuated with angels. But this one follows, you know, Earth. It's kind of a post-apocalyptic one. Angels have come down to Earth and they're kind of running rampage on the Earth and they're wrecking it and destroying it. And our main character Penryn just lives with her mum, who is schizophrenic, a paranoid schizophrenic, but however, seeing as it's the end of the world, she doesn't have any meds, and she also lives with her younger daughter, her younger sibling, who is wheelchair bound, and when one of the angels kidnaps her younger sibling, she goes on a quest to go and find her sister. However, she's going to need the help of a certain angel. It was really good, you guys. It was just a lot of fun. The ending got quite weird and wacky, but I was still here for that weird and wackiness. Like, it's sensical weird and wackiness. I also think that Raffi, the angel that she has to travel with, like, he is smoking hot. And it does kind of have the stereotypical young, you know, young adult of the 2000s kind of thing, where there's the intense stares and he's all brooding and they've got some banter going back and forth. But it was quite good. I can't wait to read the sequel. Also, the representation of angels was really creative, and I felt like it was very true to like the biblical mythology around angels. Then we've got the second tome that I read, and that was Dracul by Dacre Stoker and J.D. Barker. So this one is a prequel to Dracula, and one of the co-authors, Dacre Stoker, is the great-grandnephew of the Bram Stoker who wrote the actual Dracula. So in this one, Bram is actually one of the characters in this book, because when Bram wrote Dracula, he said it as a true story. He presented it to the publishers, this truly happened. So it makes sense the prequel would be everything that led him to write Dracula and what, you know, happened. I thought it was so great. I loved that they did their research. I loved how it perfectly captured the creepy gothic atmosphere that Dracula had. It was just like reading Dracula. It was like actually reading a prequel of Dracula. They've got the writing style and the atmosphere down. If you're a seasonal reader, then you need to read this one in October. If you love vampires or Dracula, you need to read this one because you will basically adore it. It reads like a modern day classic, so do expect the like classic kind of writing style. I just enjoyed it so much, and it's ignited my love for vampires once again. I need to read more vampire books. Then we've got The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett, and I read this one via audiobook, so I listened to it, and I'm glad I did because I don't think I would have enjoyed it as much if I read it myself. I can understand why I loved this one as a child, because all these descriptions of nature and the gardens would totally have gotten me. Even though I wasn't a nature-loving kid, I actually like to be indoors. I like to be away from bugs, but I do like nature more now, and it was just really beautiful, these lovely descriptions. And in this one, it's about this girl who has to go live with her uncle, and she kind of is very spoilt, and she meets her cousin who is also spoilt, and he's in a wheelchair and he believes he's really ill, but she's kind of taking none of his nonsense. It was nice to see their friendship form. I was a little bit wary of the way they handled his disability and what happens in the end, but I talked about it with my younger sister, who is also wheelchair bound, and she said that that does happen in some cases, so she wouldn't like discount this story as, you know, irrelevant or dock off points for how it ends. And if that's coming from her, I'll be okay with it. It still makes me feel a bit uneasy, but okay, it's a classic written in a long time ago. I'll let it off the hook this once. It was a nice read. Not the best, but not the worst. So now I'm going to talk about some of the ebooks that I read. So I reread Blue Lily Lily Blue with http.bookish on Instagram. I'll leave a link to her Insta down below. Buddy read this because it's her first time reading the series, and I thought, you know, if she's going to read it for the first time, I'll just reread it with her and we can discuss. It was really nice to delve back into the Raven cycle. Blue Lily Lily Blue is my favourite one of the Raven cycle, and Adam Parrish is my bae, so it was nice to read just more about him and my ship, and just Maggie Stiefvater, okay, Maggie Stiefvater. Moving on, I also read Fairy Tale Volume 1. This one is a manga that just feels like a beginning. It really felt like a beginning and not a story in completion. So we get introduced to this world where there are guilds and like people have powers, and there's one guy who has this amazing power, and there's this other girl who wants to get into the fairy tale guild, and they kind of all meet, and you just get the story starting off, getting a grip on the world, and that's where it ends. So I kind of feel like Fairy Tale is something where I need to have all the volumes to be able to fully appreciate it. But I did like it well enough. I didn't feel any type of way, and I kind of dislike books where I don't even love it or hate it, because if you don't feel passionate about a book, then like what was actually the point? But I'm going to try and get a lot of the volumes and then breeze through them all and binge read them, and then see how I feel once I've got a more full story arc. I also read The Glass Magician by Charlie N. Holmberg on my Kindle, and this one is the sequel to The Paper Magician, which I've talked about quite a bit on my channel now. So The Paper Magician follows this girl who has an apprenticeship with this magician who's a paper magician. She wanted to do metal magic, however she just got assigned this, and as a scholarship student she didn't really have any choice. So paper magic is kind of where you can fold origami and bring it to life, where you can read books and make illusions from things. And from the way that she ended the book, the first book, without giving any spoilers, we learned that there is more to the magic system than what first met the eye. And as I already loved the magic system, I was ready to fall in love with the second book, which I did. I enjoyed it more than the first one because I feel like this one had a lot more action, this one had a better timeline, and you got more of Sione's character, and I really do like her. I also really loved what was done with the magic system and how we got to see the different types of magic at work. So exciting. Even though it's not the best book in the world, these books are so fun to read, and I'm just digging the magic system so much that I cannot wait to get to the third book. The last book that I read last month was The Silent Songbird by Melanie Dickerson. This one is a Little Mermaid retelling where, you know, there's no water involved, and it follows this girl who is a cousin to the king, and the king is saying she has to marry this person she doesn't want to, so she decides to run away with her maid so that she can avoid this planned marriage. And in order to pretend that she's peasant level, she decides that she's going to be pretending to be mute, and that's where the Little Mermaid story comes in, especially as the guy who kind of takes her on and takes her to work in his, you know, castle is someone who's already heard her singing from when she was with the king, and he kind of wonders who had that beautiful voice. This book was really not good. It was kind of boring all the way through. The main character was really annoying and a bit spoiled, and the love story just was insta-love, and it was unbelievable, and everything just seemed really fake when it was happening. Like, some drama was happening, I was like, why is this even happening? Or when characters were acting up, it just felt like teenage squabbles rather than an actual argument or an actual problem that they needed to face. So I just felt like it was a bit juvenile. It was overly juvenile for something that's not even supposed to be young adult. It's supposed to be adult. I wasn't convinced by the romance, and as someone who loves The Little Mermaid, it kind of very quickly deviated from the fairy tales. So wasn't really a good one. So as you can see, this month I had quite a few up and down reads. I had some really good ones, I had some really bad ones, and I had a lot of in the middle ones. I'm hoping that May will be a better month for me, but please let me know in the comment section down below what was your favourite read in the month of April, and please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye!